and I have to share my screen. And just a word of caution, we run a daycare here. So if you ever see people walking behind me, that's my wife. And can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, beautiful. So my name is Paresh Motiwala. I have been in the Boston area for 23 years now. Came here, settled here, never moved out. We are like 2 miles north of the Patriots Stadium, for those who know what Patriots are, or at least what used to be. And I've been in the data platform almost since day one that I landed here. I have worked on SQL 6.5 and now on SQL 2019 and on cloud, both in AWS and Azure. But although we're going to so Gauri, go ahead. Sorry?
We could just ask everyone that's not presenting to hop on mute. That'd be great.
So, although this title says AWS versus Azure, this was first conceptualized when Google was not available. So, whatever comparison factors we are going to be using here, you can actually extend them to Google and then figure out what they do. I haven't included Google here at all. So, the other thing, if you are aware, there is a PAS annual summit, which is the Professional Association of SQL Server. And I am authorized to give you a $50 discount if you use this code. And the registration is available at this link here. And I'll tell you why I get this discount code and in the next slide. So currently I'm working at Navisite as a DBA. And Navisite is basically a third-party provider of database services, whether it is development or administration, both on-prem and in cloud. We're almost 1,500 people, DBAs work. So anytime you guys think, you don't need a full-time DBA, but you need a DBA, feel free to reach out to me. And that's the only commercial plugin that I have. So let me go ahead.
Paresh, I believe you are on mute.
Oh, yes, I was on mute. So let me just go back one more slide here. So I'm authorized to give you the $50 discount for the PAS virtual summit here, guys. And thank you for catching that I was on mute. And why do I get this? I'll tell you why. So I'm a DBA at Navisite currently, and we offer any and all database and cloud-related services for companies that can't afford their own resources in-house. So feel free to reach out to me. And this is my contact information. Again, Twitter, please tweet about it. LinkedIn is Paresh Motiwala. If you are going to reach out to me on LinkedIn, do let me know how you met me and why you would like to connect. Otherwise, I will not accept it. My Gmail address is here. If you need to connect with me, feel free to do so. Please do not spam. I'd really appreciate that. I own the Boston BI user group here in Boston, G. And then
you can teach me how to do it. That's something that I can have as one of my tasks.
And then the PAS DBA virtual group, for which I am going to be presenting again on the 8th, and PAS professional development chapter also at the New England SQL Server user group. And I organize SQL Saturdays. Actually, this is the first time that I'm not organizing the Azure Data Fest, which is rare. for the past, I think, 3 years in a row, I have been doing that. I also help organizing the Boston Code Camp and the Modern Data Tour and a whole bunch of other events. I speak at all these events as well, but the Boston Code Camp, the SQL Rally, PASS, the annual summit, at a lot of virtual groups and so on. I mostly talk about 100 or 200 level database topics and a lot of professional development topics. I also mentor a lot of data pros locally, enable them to get up and speak, become great speakers, and I am also a public speaking coach, which I run through my company called the Circles of Growth. I'm taught almost 500 or a little more than 500 students now already. Yes, in my free time, I am an avid photographer and a singer, and I help a lot of nonprofit organizations here to collect or raise money through whatever I do for them. So, AWS versus Azure, right? Why do we have to compare that? Because this is one of the standard problems that we run into, because AWS, yes, was the pioneer in the cloud space, but if you look at it, Azure, as in case of internet, also Microsoft was pretty late to jump into the bandwagon, but they have come back with a solid vengeance. Although, yes, we know AWS is the market leader currently, and Azure is catching up pretty quick. So if you are in a situation or you are in a team where you have to decide what goes first, AWS or Azure, and you can actually take these points and assign points to them yourself. Maybe you can do it out of 1, you can do it out of 10, you can do it out of 100, and then add them up on either side and see, gee, you know what, according to my company's requirement, Azure is great. Of course, I'm a big fan of Microsoft, so I would always say Azure, but then let's see, I don't want to cloud your judgments by doing that, right? So what we'll do is we'll talk about the compute power that both AWS and Azure offer. We'll talk about storage that is offered by them also, variety of storages, right? And network, I'm not much sure how much I can speak about for network, but the point to connect, point to consider is there, and so definitely feel free to evaluate that also. So even you being a data professional, you want to know about the network because somebody within your organization will help you take that decision. Okay, you know what, compared to what our requirements are, AWS is good, Azure sucks, or whatever. And then pricing, the most important thing, right? Both of them really want your money. How do you keep your money down? And that's going to be a huge factor in how you do this, right? And then support plan. How do they support them, right? I mean, AWS versus Azure. Yeah, it's one thing to just make a sale to you and get away. So we'll talk about the support plan as well. And then how integrated are they with the other ecosystems and other products that are available, for example, in the marketplace? And then how married are they to open source? For example, you know, only about 4 or 5 years that Microsoft declared Visual Studio as an open source and so on. So Microsoft is catching up, so watch out AWS. The containers and orchestration support, I haven't got any experience on this, but we'll still talk about it in a bare bones fashion. So how does this work for us and whether it will affect your organization's vendor selection strategy? So compliance, right? I mean, one of the most important thing, in fact, you know what, I would say, forget about pricing or support plan or anything. How compliant are they with your organization's requirement, whether they are better in terms of supporting healthcare industry or PII-based information or defense industry and so on. So, you know what happened last year when Microsoft got the 10 billion award compared to AWS, of course, the politics of it aside, but Microsoft actually has a specific cloud section dedicated DoD only. So, you know, the user interface, right? That is something, what is easy? For example, when I first jumped into AWS, it took me almost 3.5 hours to set up one VM. This is about 3 or 4 years ago when I was doing my big data class. Whereas I was already doing the same thing in Azure, and I got a new VM up and running in literally less than 1 minute. So what is the difference? Okay, so let's talk about that too. And licensing kind of matches with what goes with pricing, but what can you carry? Can you carry your own license, for example? Can you not carry your own licenses to the cloud and so on? We'll look at those too. Do they offer hybrid cloud capabilities? Do they offer multi-cloud capabilities? And I will also talk a little more about the hybrid cloud capabilities as well as multi-cloud capabilities, because a lot of organizations, especially the larger organizations, find out that one day suddenly they wake up and the Azure East Zone is down or AWS Central Zone is down, and they have a lot of problems trying to get the job done. So how about having two clouds, right? So when I was working at Nuance, we eventually went for a second vendor, and it was not AWS, believe it or not, it was Google Cloud. So, and then the support ecosystem. So what is the difference between support plan and support ecosystem? So I would say, for example, the Azure Data Fest, right, is one of the classic support ecosystem. Have you ever seen anything like this in AWS, for example? We'll talk about that also along the way. And I think I might spend a little more time on this one than most other bullets. So, and if you do have questions, feel free to ask me anytime, right? So let's go. So let's talk about the compute power, right? So what happens is that in AWS, right, the users can configure their own VMs or choose any pre-configured machine images, etc. Correct? And they can select the amount of memory, VMs, the size of the VMs that they're looking for in different regions and in different availability zones. Okay. Whereas in Azure, you first choose the virtual hard disk, what you want for that, and which is equivalent, like it's like a machine instance in AWS, and then you create your own VMs. And once you have the VM, then you're golden. So you can see that here, irrespective of what your requirements are, I think if you're just going by 1 point each, I would definitely give 1 mark to AWS and 1 mark to Azure. The compute powers are there. The only thing is that a lot of AWS is essentially based on pre-configured machines. They're not as dynamic as Azure. Azure, you can have much granular control over the types of machine that you're looking for. Again, this is based on what my experience is also. So if you have a different experience, feel free to share that with me or tweet about it. I'll take it with all the humility possible, right? So storage, okay? So for those who have worked with AWS or Azure, say for an Azure example, if you create your VM, they strongly recommend don't do anything on the D drive because Microsoft can take away the D drive anytime. But Azure does offer temporary storage, right? And then block storages are available. A lot of options are available, especially if you're using big data like NoSQL through Azure Table and HT Insight. Azure also has site recovery, and that is very crucial. I haven't seen that exact feature in AWS, right? So AWS actually gives you temporary storage that is allocated, right, once the instance is started, but it is destroyed when the instance is terminated. Now, I don't know if this means that that instance itself is destroyed or whether it is stopped. I would really hate for the storage to go away if the VM is stopped, for example, right? So this is something that I spoke to you about, correct? My information about networking is not much, so I have basically, come on, baby, let's go. Yeah. So Amazon offers virtual private cloud. I can't really talk much about this, for example. I really don't know how to handle that or evaluate it properly. So let's just go with this information for now. And if you have anything that you would like to add by way of information. You have my contact information, and I will be sharing that contact information again towards the end of the day. But please give me your personal experiences, okay? I would really love to see that happen. So then the next one, right? The pricing. Oh my God. This is one thing that you have to look into. For example, Microsoft's pricing is also pay as you go, but they charge you in increments of minutes, okay? Which is a lot of cost saving for people who want to go in and out within 15 minutes or 20 minutes and so on, right? And there are times when I have used it for 1 hour, shut it down. This actually then brings us to a very important point. This has not got anything to do with the comparison, but we will talk about it as to how do we go about working towards cost cutting here, right? So what we had to do was, in one of the organizations where I was as a consultant once, they went into cloud, and the first month they had a bill of approximately $5 million, right? Which is basically their IT budget, a hardware budget basically, for the next 3 years. But that they paid in 1 month. Why? Because people were turning on powerful VMs and never remembering to shut them off. And that is how they learned about it, that, okay, we need somebody who will be keeping a close eye on the cost. So we had a person who came in, created a Power BI dashboard on what our cost was yesterday, what our cost is today, and so on. And once they had that information nailed down, their costs became fairly logical. And then they put in some scripts to go by, where if you say after 5 p.m., your VM would automatically be shut down, not destroyed. It would just be shut down. That will help you cut down a lot of costs too. So let me go ahead. Support plans, right? Okay. If you look at it, right, here's the thing. So if you're a very heavy user, for example, if you are using, say, 10,000 units of AWS, then you will really cough up big time through your support plan, because it is scalable. So if you have 10,000 units, then you will pay so much. If you have 20,000 units, you will pay so much. Whereas in Azure, it is like a flat monthly rate. So if you are a good size user, then you would definitely want to use Azure. And again, in this case, I would say I would give it 1 point here, maybe half point to AWS. So again, let's go to the next one. Yeah, this is crucial for us, right? So integrations and open source, right? As we know that Microsoft only recently made these tools. I'm going to click on both of them right now. So Amazon was pioneer, so it had much better inside relationships with a lot of other vendors, whereby they could go ahead and have those integrations built in. So a lot of these things were taken for granted if you are in AWS, which was not easily the case in Azure. But over the years now, didn't GitHub was bought by Microsoft now, right? If I'm not mistaken, that is what it was. So
yes, that's right.
Right. Okay. So now, as you can see, that Microsoft is warming up to the idea, and because Microsoft unfortunately has its own operating system, or fortunately, it used to be not very friendly to Linux machines. That has now since changed. But then, if you look at it, most of the organizations that you work on, they work on Active Directory of sorts, right? And for Azure to be integrated with your on-prem Active Directory or with an Azure Active Directory gives you a tremendous edge on security. And that is one of the more important parts of what you do here, right? Compliance and security. Everything else can be negotiated and so on. Now, Visual Studio, SQL databases, right? Now, if you can see that, more native integration is easily available in Azure compared to AWS. So containers and their orchestration support, right? So if you know that Amazon is always investing in these services and they continue to do more and more, and they are now maturing. Like Hadoop is there for them. The AWS Elastic MapReduce, which is now kind of becoming defunct. They're being replaced by other sources now, but they have added a lot of machine learning tools, for example. Whereas Microsoft is very good at catching up, which is something that I have never been really able to understand as to why would they want to really just work on catching up as against being the advanced uh, contributor or pioneer in some things like these. So they eventually do that. Now Microsoft has a Hadoop support. They call it HD Insight. So I don't know why. Then the Windows Server itself, for example, gives you integration with Docker, right? And even the Hyper-V containers have the same exact thing. So you can now have Linux containers very easily and making it very formidable opponent to Amazon. But here I would definitely give AWS 1 mark and Azure half a mark, for example. Cool. Now compliance. More important here, right? So don't laugh, but Amazon has had really seriously long relationship with a lot of government agencies. Their compliance offerings, right? As you can see that they have so many different compliance offerings. I don't know what it is, but yes, I know FIPS and I know HIPAA, for example. But the other ones I don't know, but they are offering. And I think what has happened is over the years, Microsoft has also warmed up to that. And now they say that they have, mind you, I'm saying they claim, okay? They are offering 50 of those compliances for you, which means that for me, the biggest winner is having an entire set of its cloud offerings being carved out for DoD itself. And that possibly explains how they ended up getting the DoD contract for $10 billion. Forget the fact that Jeff Bezos is a staunch Democrat and owns Washington Post. So that might have also figured in the government's or the administration decision making. So now what I would do is I will give both of them one each over here. Microsoft, I would say maybe 1 and Amazon 0.9 in this case because of the next slide, which is the user interface, right? Or the user friendliness, whatever you want to call it, right? In Microsoft language, does anybody remember, just show of hands, what is the thumb rule? If you're stuck in a Microsoft machine, what would you do? You can just type out the answers and then maybe I will come to know about it. Let me know if somebody responds to that. If you are stuck in a Microsoft environment, what would you do? No responses yet?
Check the documentation.
Okay, that's a good one. But remember, this is from the time when Microsoft really had no documentation. It totally sucked, right? So the first thing you do when in doubt in Microsoft case is right click, right? I mean, whenever in doubt, just right click. That is the thing because the user friendliness was so much. The other thing is the guy in the street syndrome, right? I mean, if you ask somebody, almost literally, if you're traveling in a train and you talk to somebody about Microsoft who's sitting next to you, chances are he'll know something about it. So definitely the user friendliness, I would give 100% more marks to Azure compared to AWS. So I would say about half a mark to Amazon, but 1 mark to half a mark to AWS and 1 full mark to Azure, right? As I say, you really don't need to learn too many new things in Azure because the features that are kind of transposed over there are absolutely compatible one-on-one for you as well, right? So 1.5 mark there, right? Okay. So the next one is on licensing. So actually, there are people within an organization, like the cost-cutting people that I was talking to you about. Their full-time job is to look after the cost of licensing and whether you are compliant on the licensing part of it, right? So I can actually give you the link at the end of the presentation where you can check out this thing. But both of them offer you to take your own licenses, so you don't have to necessarily worry about having to buy a brand new license, something that you already have. What do you do with the on-prem licenses? You don't have to worry about those things anymore, right? Because they offer that. I am not 100% vested in this particular part of the topic, but if you look at it, right, they can use dedicated hosts, right? And then make sure that all the Microsoft, for example, if you are hosting a Microsoft server or a SQL server on AWS, you can carry your license through mobility, right? I mean, they let you carry out these things. So in terms of this, I would say definitely 0.9 to AWS, but 1 to Azure in this particular case. Then hybrid cloud capabilities, right? Again, oops, sorry, this is not. So AWS, again, they started with Snowball Edge, right? And they said, okay, we'll give you a 100 terabyte hard drive for moving your workloads between its cloud and clients data centers, for example. And it also added much needed hybrid element to its portfolio when it partnered with VMware. I think about last year or maybe 1.5 years back, so that they can actually burst into the cloud environment. So it's what they're saying is either it's a pure public cloud or nothing, right? And it is still working to get into hybrid. The other thing you also want to see is that AWS is not very friendly when you go for multi-cloud DR scenario. Actually, I have a full presentation on my company is going to cloud. What should I do? And one of the things you want to talk about is look for a secondary cloud provider too, because you don't want all your eggs in the same basket. For example, you can have your primary data centers and whatever you have in Azure, but you also want to have a failover mechanism whereby it would be going over, or your disaster recovery could be in Google, not just in another region in Azure. So Microsoft has been a great provider and a supporter for hybrid cloud services, right? So platforms like Azure Store Simple, for example, hybrid SQL servers, Azure Stacks, some of the few things that are available for us to go ahead and make the most of it, okay? So here I would give both of them 1 mark only because I'm slightly more vested in Azure. Being a Microsoft guy all along, I would definitely give maybe 1 mark to Azure, 0.9 to AWS. But you can make your same or different inferences based on what your workload is in the company. Okay. Then support ecosystem, right? So what I would like to see is this is something which will actually distinguish between what we have to offer here, right? Who do you think will get the most? Come on, you can do this. Anybody? Let's look at what is involved, right? So how many free learning resources do we have? Okay. If you check out almost everything that you try to learn about AWS comes out of the AWS documentation only. It's not bad, okay? I actually picked up the whole Postgres course because our Postgres data warehouse was in AWS, and I was actually able to learn it right through them. But when I ask questions, oh my God, in the user group, you will get some serious jerks out there who will tell you, okay, did you look at that? Did you look at that? Oh God, of course not. Otherwise, I would not be asking these damn questions. So how about asking or helping me with a proper resource? Okay, look here, and this is where you would want to do. A lot more free learning resources are available in Azure or for anything pertaining to Microsoft, including like the Azure Data Fest, for example. I haven't seen anything like an Azure Data Fest in AWS Data Fest, for example. So definitely free learning resources, you definitely want to check out. Learn.microsoft.com has tremendous amount of free resources. For example, if you want to learn about containers, you can actually go ahead and learn containers right in Microsoft. They will give you they'll give you your own sandbox environment, which will be destroyed within 4 hours of your completion of the course, which means that you don't really have to invest in AWS or your cloud resources to be able to learn something new. So parent organization like Professional Association of SQL Server, right? For those who know, I'm very deeply involved with PAS, as you could have seen in the earlier slide where I told you I run 4 user groups, for example, and I haven't come across anything like this for AWS, like a central thing. Has anybody else worked on AWS and know of an AWS central resources, especially pertaining to cloud computing? Feel free to share that. I would love to know that. But then, despite being on this thing and in Azure and AWS, especially AWS, I've been now for over a year. I haven't had much luck finding too many resources, in-person user groups, for example. SQL Saturdays, again, for the data platform, right? If you look at it, it's a free learning tool, free learning and networking event. Nothing like that I've seen in AWS. So, and again, when I say SQL Saturdays, please don't get stuck on the fact that, oh, you're talking about the whole big comparison between AWS and Azure. Why are you stuck only on the SQL? But what I'm saying is that at the granular level also, Azure's support system is far better than AWS. User groups. In Boston alone, for example, you will see 2 Azure groups, 4 AI user groups, not all dedicated necessarily to Microsoft, but definitely the bigger the city, the better resources you have. So in that case, if that is not the way to go, because say, for example, if you're in a small town like say Poughkeepsie, New York, right? It's not a very big town, but if you want to go ahead and attend some of these sessions, where would you go? So you can't always drive down to New York City because it will take you 3 hours just to get there from Poughkeepsie, right? Or if you are in Worcester in Massachusetts, it'll take you 2 hours to get to Boston. So what do you do? So what you can do is then definitely look for the virtual groups. For example, PAS has more than 35 virtual groups. A lot of virtual groups, they offer you cloud computing resources. They give you SQL computing, they give you Power BI computing, and so many topics. The virtual group that you can choose are almost immense. So definitely feel free to explore pass.org and you will see a lot of them. There's something that will definitely be what you're looking at. MVPs. Let me know if you have heard of something like this in AWS, where AWS or Amazon actually spend some time in recognizing people who have contributed to their platform or various components of the platform. For we have AI MVPs, and they were just released in past 2 or 3 days. You have AI MVPs, you have data platform MVPs, you have Microsoft Office MVPs, right? So if that is the case, anytime, and most of these MVPs are hanging around. For example, today itself on our global data fest here, you will see at least 10 or 15 speakers are Microsoft MVPs. These are the people They are so humble, and if you tweet to them, usually they will respond to you in literally 5 or 10 minutes. So now, how do you know who these people are? So Microsoft has a website where you can actually go and find out who the local MVPs are. So if you want to start a user group, you can start with that. So again, this is a lot of information for you to take in for the support ecosystem, but for my organization's cloud initiative to succeed, I really want a good support ecosystem. And that is, again, guess who, right? Then if you are stuck, for example, I don't know the corresponding thing for cloud, but if you have a hashtag of SQL family and tweet about it, the key is how do you pose your question in 280 characters or less, right? If you ask meaningful questions, I have seen within 10 or 15 minutes, somebody will respond to you because if not here, it's morning. Right now, it is midnight in New Zealand, but if you are stuck in the, say about 6 p.m., it will be about 10 p.m. in New Zealand, and somebody from New Zealand might actually respond to your thing. So I would definitely look forward to using this several times a week, actually, if I'm stuck. Similar hashtags are there for Power BI and PowerShell. So this is my contact information again, but let me go and tell you what we did, summarize what we did first, right, today and how much we covered. So we first spoke about the compute power, right, the various types of compute powers that are available. My thing was one each for Azure and maybe 1 to Azure and 0.9 to AWS. Storage, I give them both 1 mark each. Network, I really don't know how to calculate here in my case, but definitely this is something that you want to work with your network storage people and find out, or not network storage people, the network admins in your organization, and see how they would like to go ahead and evaluate both AWS and Azure for your specific requirements, right? And in pricing, I found that Azure is going essentially by the minute. So if you are a conscientious user and you have the gatekeeper to hell, as they call it, then they will actually help you control a lot of the cost. So for me, the winner would be essentially pay by minute, because a lot of what we do as developers, essentially you can create now and quickly forget about it. So just create something, destroy it, you're done. You're paying by the minute. And for support plan, right? As I said, the support plan is essentially based on pay as you go on both sides, but the higher your utility or utilization in AWS, the more money you pay in AWS compared to Azure. Also, because of the support ecosystem itself, right? You don't really need to invest so much in the support plan. So if you look at it, I would say definitely 1 mark to Azure in support plan and maybe half a mark to AWS over here. Integrations and open source, right? If you look at this, the integrations and open source, I would definitely, if you might remember, I would say 1 mark to AWS and maybe 0.8 to Microsoft. This is something which is crucial. Containers, both are equally strong. I think they can both get 1 mark, so not much by way of comparison there. Compliance. Much better compliance. Microsoft claims they have 50 certifications for compliance and such, right? And AWS has a few. I'm not sure of all of them because I don't really find this material easily available for you. So you have to really dig it out. So that is why for compliance, I would give 1 mark to Microsoft or Azure and 0.8 maybe to AWS. I sound very partial or vested interest in Microsoft, then possibly it is. User interface, we also spoke about how easy it is to use a Windows interface in Azure compared to anything else in AWS. But it doesn't mean, because if you look at it, a lot of solid geeks that you have worked with, they are so used to command line, right? So they really don't give a two hoots for whether it's a point and click or you have to script it out. They actually don't mind if it is not point and click. In fact, one of the developers I was working with, he would even use 100% GitHub check-in, check-out, reporting on that GitHub was all command line for him. And I totally hated him for doing that. But he felt very good about it. So if you have developers who use a lot of the command line features, then I would definitely go ahead and give AWS 1 mark. Otherwise, I would say 0.8 to AWS and 1 to Microsoft, because Microsoft also supports PowerShell and a lot of other scripting languages that you can possibly use in AWS. The Linux support is also there now, so remember that. Licensing cost, we also spoke about that, right? So licensing, both of them let you carry your licensing. So I would say one each. I wouldn't worry too much about anything else over here. Hybrid cloud capabilities, significantly higher in Azure. I would say 1 mark to Azure and 0.8 to AWS. And then finally, ecosystem, I would say 0.2 to AWS and 1 to Azure. Few other things that you would definitely want to consider is the interface for AI and machine learning, for example. I haven't even considered that over here, right? That is very big time, big data and analytics, right? So that is some of the things that you really want to work on. I give slightly higher score to Microsoft in terms of big data and analytics now than anything else. Data orchestration, right? And ETL, again, if you look at all the big data thing, you will understand that they are both almost compatible. In visualization, I would definitely give Microsoft 100 out of 100 as compared to anything that's available natively in AWS. What else? Serverless is one of the things that the functions, the Azure functions are much easier as compared to the Lambda architecture of AWS. So that is something I haven't covered here because that would take me at least another 1 hour to go through all that. So I didn't use that over here, but you definitely want to do that. Variety of database support is also available. So that is something you want to build into your analysis. And then finally, application monitoring itself, right? I mean, if you look at it, I have been much happier using the graphical interfaces that are available for monitoring Azure resources compared to almost anything else, right? And there's a few other things that you can possibly read up. It's the management of all the resources per se. How do you interface the IoT into your cloud? And I would say that's pretty much all I can think of right now. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. I am not 100% expert on this, but I can definitely, if I cannot answer the question now, I will promise if you can email me or tweet about it, I will respond to it. So let me share what we spoke about it today, right? Okay, give me 1 sec. And I will share my, how do you do this? My contact information is here for those who are interested. It's about 10:45, so we have about 5 minutes for question and answer, and then 10 minutes for me to take a little bio break and come back because I have a next session coming up. So, anybody have questions? Is there anything that you would have liked to see that I did not cover? I have 2 days before the next session that is coming up in the Peru SQL Saturday that I'm speaking about the same topic on Saturday afternoon. Okay, so I can share stop sharing my screen now. And we can just, there are some questions or no? You, okay, so people are generally, okay, some pretty awesome comments. Oh my God. Um, any network security related differences, right? As I said, I would love to look into this deeper, but I'm not really a network guy. I have put my humble request to you. Please work with your network team to find that out. Um, so see, our on the hour or the second, okay, so that is nice to know, but then again, if it is per second, then wow, I would really love to see that. I haven't heard that, and the material that I've been reading up has been all about AWS pricing, basically based on tiers only. And somebody has said, damn, what about reboot? What about reboot? You always restart the environments all the time in Microsoft. Actually, I am not kidding, but it's been almost 10 years that I have had to really forcibly reboot, for example, a SQL Server because it misbehaved. Yes, there are times when the queries misbehave and they create problems, but SQL Server itself creating a problem is not uh, done uh, much anymore. So somebody has gone on to say um, the actual DoD procurement and acquisitions professionals are some of the best in the federal government. I would say so, definitely. I mean, otherwise, hey, this is the security of the world's greatest nation, and keeping that in mind, I am absolutely convinced that they must be really some awesome people, right? So uh, please go ahead and feel free to tweet about this. I would love to hear back your feedback. Is there a feedback form that they can fill up here?
I will check into that. I don't have that information offhand.
Otherwise, I can say this session was attended by 300 people, right? I mean, who's going to check? So, and then kind of have a false boasting for myself. But yeah, we can technically, I think, stop the recording now because there are no more questions coming. So, guys, once again, thank you. And thank you for spending your time early in the morning. I hope you got something out of this session. And I look forward to any or all feedback, positive, negative, everything. If you want, I can just share my screen one last time for those who want to check my emails. Here it is. My Twitter handle is Paresh Motiwala. I'm on LinkedIn with Paresh Motiwala and pareshmotiwala@gmail.com. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I think I will call it a day now. And I will log in about